This program is intended for informational purposes only and does not contain medical advice. As always, please contact your physician or qualified healthcare provider with any questions regarding a medical condition.
When I got diagnosed with heart disease, I had no symptoms whatsoever. I went to the gynecologist for a pap smear and walked out with heart problems. So you may say, how the fuck does that happen?
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Hot and Bothered with Melyssa Ford. I am your host, Melyssa Ford, and today I'm going to go off script a little bit. From the last couple of episodes, you guys have seen me interview several different medical professionals, and they have been wildly informative and just incredible guests. But today, I decided to take advantage of interviewing one of my close personal girlfriends who just happens to work in the medical field. So I'm getting a twofer here. I'm sitting here with my girlfriend, Nicole Winn. Hey, girl. Hey. And of course, Daisy is here.
Daisy.
God, that was so sexy, Daisy. She's got something in her teeth. Nicole is a former critical care nurse, and she has been in the medical device industry for over 20 years. And the reason that I wanted to conduct this interview with her today is because recently she had her fourth open heart surgery. And do you mind if I tell everybody what your age is? Because you don't.
Absolutely.
She's 52 years old. My God, like, she's my goals. I just want everybody to know this. People say I'm their goals. Well, I have my own set of goals, and Nicole is one of them. So when I went to the hospital to visit Nicole, and obviously we were, the girls rallied around you.
Sure
Somebody
did.
came up with a schedule as to when we were going to come and visit, who was going to be preparing food.
They showed up.
The village showed up. And, not to go completely off topic, because I want to stay here for a second, but whenever I hear men talking about how lonely women are going to be in our later years who haven't had children and never got married, boy, was this an example of that being such a misnomer, such a source of misinformation, a blatant lie, if you will.
Yeah.
Because your village showed up and showed out for you. And this is all I ever see, with my circle of girlfriends, is watching the way the village shows up, whether it's for birthday celebrations or whether it's for funerals, or if it's, one of us is in the hospital and we need to figure out, okay, what does the next few weeks to few months look like in terms of helping her work through rehabilitation and kind of getting back on her feet. And it was it was so beautiful to be a part of it and to witness it.
And last minute, this happened urgently. I wouldn't say emergently, but urgently. You know, not planned, not scheduled. My family, I'm from Chicago originally, so how do you do this big surgery, your fourth one, and your family isn't even around?
Yes.
My family was around.
Yes.
My second family was right
Your
here.
chosen family.
Yeah, my
your
chosen
family.
family.
Your family, if you will. Okay, so I wanted to make that point known, because that was a very, very, that was just so profound for me to actually witness. Yeah. But also what was really interesting, whenever I enter a situation, I always turn into a psychologist. So I also get very observant about the surroundings, and I'm looking at all the key players, and I'm just kind of processing the environment as I see it, and then, just cataloging it inside of my brain, because I'm like, that's fascinating. I wonder what that can be used as, in terms of content. And what I witnessed by being in the hospital with you was I had never in my entire life seen anybody advocate for themselves the way that you did. When I say that this woman with tubes coming out of her chest, all over her face and body, weakened because, your chest had been cracked open and your heart had been manipulated. Yeah. She said to these doctors, give me my chart right now. Let me see what you're talking about, because I'm going to tell you what I will and will not sign off on. And I was like, oh my God. Yeah. And I want to go over what it was that was happening in that moment, because I just heard a whole bunch of really, really big words that were medical jargon that meant absolutely nothing to me, but they meant everything to you, and you knew exactly how to decipher your chart. And you knew, based on your own experiences, professionally and personally, what was necessary and what was just extra. And what that led me to think was the average person could never advocate for themselves like this. And that also led me to think doctors always act like they have all the answers. And that led me to think just how much malpractice happens in hospitals that the average person is unaware of. These are all the questions that just kind of like, arose in my mind while I was there visiting you, and thought to myself, I got to talk her into doing an episode. I have to talk her into an episode because I feel like you are a wealth of information for the average person when it comes to knowing and seeing what happens behind the scenes as a critical care nurse in your past.
Right.
But in addition to that, advice that you can give the average person for self-advocacy. Let's just do a little bit of get to know you stuff. Let's do that inventory, get that out of the way, and then we're going to delve into your health journey and self-advocacy. We're going to get into a little bit of gossip as to what happens behind the scenes. Is the hospital environment really like Grey's Anatomy, or is that complete and total BS? So you said you were born and raised in Chicago.
Yes.
Okay. And what was growing up in Chicago like for you?
Oh my gosh. Chicago, well, I grew up as an athlete, first of all. And I think that's important with all these medical problems to
especially having heart problems, being an athlete. Like, what kind of athlete were you?
I ran track, I played volleyball, I played basketball.
And so your heart issues did not present themselves while you were while you were growing up?
Not that I knew of.
Okay.
So fast forward, when I did start getting sick, I look back on my because I ran track through college. Mm-hmm. So from 4th grade all the way up to college, and then to all of a sudden get diagnosed with heart disease, it was like, was I sick to begin with? So they did diagnose me with congenital heart disease. And what that means is it's something that you're born with. Mm-hmm. Common congenital heart disease could be something as simple as a hole in your heart. You could have what they call a leaky valve or a murmur. I'm sure some of us have gone to the doctor and said, oh, you have a murmur. It's no big deal. And you're like, not in the medical profession thinking, no big deal.
Yeah, I hate when a lot of times doctors are very dismissive when they're like, oh, you got a murmur. It's fine. Yeah. It's just like, what is a murmur? Can you stop speaking in medical jargon? What does that actually mean?
And then you're saying it's no big deal.
Short term and long term. What is that murmur going to turn into? Like, I don't know, a guffaw, a scream, I don't know. What's that going to turn into in the future?
Yeah.
What do I have to look out for? How do I prepare myself or look out for diagnosed symptoms?
Yeah. So I look back on that. I remember thinking to myself, why are my teammates not huffing and puffing, and I'm trying to get through workouts, and I'm like dying? So what do we all do? Push harder, work harder. You're not good enough.
Especially when you're young.
Yeah.
We have this feeling of immortality when we're young, like nothing can happen to us, and so we fall victim to that adage of just keep on going, keep on pushing.
Absolutely.
This is what youth is for, to completely abuse the hell out of your body.
I got to college and now we're doing 2-a-days and I'm just like cross country. I'm like, I'm dying. And I'm sitting here thinking, never did I think, go get your heart checked out or go to the doctor. I was getting physicals. And during one of those physicals in college, they said, oh, you have a murmur. No big deal. That's normal. So I never followed this. So this murmur. So what is a murmur? So valves. So the heart has 4 chambers, right? And valves are responsible for conducting the flow of blood through the heart in the right direction.
Okay.
So from right to left, right?
Okay.
So for the sake of conversation, we'll just divide these 4 chambers in the heart to 2 and just say there's a right side of the heart and a left side of the heart.
Okay, thank you. Because sometimes the medical jargon can get it'll start to make your eyes cross.
Yes. And I'm going to keep it that way because as we talk further, I'm going to refer to this right side and left side because there's one side that's a little bit more important than the other. Mm-hmm. And that means the left side is more important because it does all the work. It's responsible for getting blood out of the heart.
Okay.
The right side takes the blood to the left, right?
Okay, so you were,
So I
an
had these
athlete
valves.
you were an
Yeah.
athlete through college. They discovered that you had a murmur. Let's talk about college and what was your inspiration for wanting to become a nurse practitioner and then end up as a critical care nurse? Kind of give us the
Funny you
Cliff
asked that
Notes, yeah.
question because I actually wanted to be a doctor.
Okay.
I did. And guess what happened?
What?
I was like, this is too much school. And so I knew I wanted to be in medicine because I've been in medicine throughout my entire high school. I was a radiology file clerk. I did some work in anesthesia. I was an anesthesia tech in college. So I knew medicine was my thing. Before you're an anesthesia nurse, you have to do a round in critical care. So that's how I ended up in critical care.
Okay,
If that
so
making sense.
what does a day in the life of a critical care nurse look like? And let's imagine that it's like a code red day, where it's all hands on deck, it's complete and total anarchy.
Yes.
What does that day look like as a critical care nurse?
So
Not like the easy breezy day. What's being in the weeds?
So critical care nursing, so keep in mind there are specialties within critical care. So usually there's a med surge, there's a burn unit, there's cardiology, cardiac surgery, med surge. So my specialty was cardiology, cardiac surgery. And the day would be, for this particular, most of the centers that I work were high acuity centers. And what that means is that the patients are really, really sick. So if you work at like a teaching hospital, sometimes the acuity is a little higher than, let's say, a community hospital where they usually transfer those patients out to the bigger hospitals for further care. So where I work, the acuity is pretty high. So I would experience that cold blue 3 or 4 times a day. That would be normal. As you guys know, I'm going to kind of speak a little direct and candid. So because my experience with life and death is truly life and death, even over to my personal life, and as well as my sales career now in the medical device industry. It always stayed at this acute level of life and death. So for me, I would experience death as a nurse maybe two or three times a week because the acuity was really high. We took really, really sick patients. But for all of that, it sounds bad. It was a lot of living, and there were a lot of great stories and survivors, that make you smile. But the truth of the matter is that you got to kind of have some tough skin. So sometimes when we look at doctors and nurses, and sometimes they don't have that
warmth. Seeming or like leading with compassion, it's because they have to temper that so that they don't fall apart.
Sometimes.
I don't think that anybody really ever takes into account the mental health of their doctors or their nurses. I mean, I'm coming to the hospital, I'm looking for help. So I'm not really thinking about, hey, what are you going through? But that must be something that specifically because you've witnessed it, you've seen it. Like, what are some of the things that you've kind of like seen or witnessed being a critical care nurse amongst your peers and the doctors in terms of finding ways to maintain their mental health, or just
I don't know anybody talks about it. I think we just get used to it. I think once you're in critical care and you see the acuity and you see how real it is, I don't think anybody, well, back then, because this was back in the 90s, and so I don't know if people talk about how they're really coping with it. You just know you have to figure out a way to make it work for you to get through each day. So sometimes for me, I liked very, very sick patients, and
Why?
usually because they couldn't talk.
Wait, that sounds crazy.
I know.
You preferred the patients that couldn't talk?
That couldn't talk because my passion and my goal was always saving lives. So if you talk, that slowed me down. The family members slowed me down. I just wanted my 12 hours to keep you alive and save you, because that's what critical care nursing is. It's like once you come out of surgery, it's always trying to figure out this puzzle and what's going on with the patient. So it's very simple things mean a lot, meaning paying attention to your, what you see on the monitor. If you are able to talk, listening to you, because those little words can mean what's going to be coming later. Oh, I just feel, I'm a little nauseous, no big deal, that kind of thing if they're talking. And you're paying attention and something down the line is about to happen. Some of my patients that did do that code blue, for the lack of better words that we're going to call it, some of them I knew that something was going to go wrong. Because I'm paying attention, I'm like, I can't figure out what's going on with this patient, especially surgical patients, because they come out very unpredictable.
Has there been a circumstance in which you could accurately predict what was going to happen with a patient and you tried to alert a doctor and they shut you down?
Shut me down so much so in nursing, you have to document, in healthcare, you have to document heavily. But there's a such thing as over-documenting, because you could easily be in a lawsuit just from over documenting too much. There is a such thing as too much. I know you're like, what? But yes. So you document enough. They actually teach you how to document. And I remember getting a report and I'm thinking, why aren't we doing XYZ on this patient? Because they seem sicker than what I'm really getting. And to basically make a long story short, I watched this patient just deteriorate hour by hour. And I'm doing all I can. I'm calling the doctor. No one even came. I'm just getting all these, back then you could take more verbal orders. And so I would get all this stuff and I'm documenting. The one moment that I didn't write, MD notified, that was the knife in your chest right there. Because I fought everything to keep this man alive. And guess what? He ended up dying. Dying on Christmas. The worst, if you can't take that personal and that pain and know that you could have done more, but you had this doctor that wouldn't listen, and guess what? I got blamed for it. I got blamed for it. So that's why, and that leads me to, why did I leave nursing? As much as I loved it, I really got tired of covering some not every doctor is bad, but some of the doctors.
So people want to know the tea. They listen, there's a reason why medical procedural dramas are as popular as they are.
Yeah.
People like to watch the drama. Everybody walks into a hospital and says, so are the doctors sleeping with the nurses? What's happening here? Is it super mixy in this environment? People want to know. But they are also curious about, what happens behind the scenes. Doctors and nurses, they show up as professionals, but that the second that they get out of earshot, they're talking shit about somebody. So what are some of the things that, just made you decide, that's it. I love critical care nursing, but the environment itself just does not work for me anymore?
It was a couple of reasons. The first one was, like I said, I got tired of covering their butt. It's when all else fails, it feels like it's always the nurse's fault, never the doctor's. The hospital invests more in doctors than nursing, right? So that was one. And then the second one was, it can be a very catty profession. And
how so?
Oh my gosh! So,
I mean, because here's the thing. Look,
because I'm still a nurse, and I love it. But
before you finish your statement, Dr. Somi Javed sat here and we talked a little bit about competitiveness amongst women in a professional setting, and so it's interesting for you to organically just bring that up. So I'm always going to ask about that because it's fascinating to examine female dynamics in different environments. Yeah. And so you say that in the nursing profession, there is an element of cattiness. And so expound on that a little bit.
I think it's just I think it exists with any profession. You've got coworkers, it's competitive, you got jealousy, and you got
And how does that manifest? What is the behavior like?
The behavior is so it depends. I work for a union hospital, so you can write each other up and you can write your managers up and things like that. So you can get somebody that's trying to report you for what they perceive as something you shouldn't have done or something like that. It's just assigning you the worst patient every time. And you can tell they're just taking something out on you. You know what I mean? So it's just always this little, my colleagues were never my friends. This is the first profession that I went into in terms of being in the medical device industry, where I actually kind
Have
of
developed some friendships.
developed some friendships. But as a nurse, I never hung out with my colleagues after work or anything like that because, and this is going to sound bad, I knew it. I wanted to be able to go to work the next day, and if I had to curse you out, I would, and I wouldn't care about it. I'm just being truly transparent because that's, especially with critical care nurses are very high strung. We're very type A because you have to be. You have to command the room. Because, when you spoke with that code blue, what actually happens in a code blue is everybody shows up in your room. You got to run the room and kind of delegate and tell people kind of what to do. And you just, that's just the way it is. So we're very almost controlling people. I think I don't know if this is a fact, but I'm going to say at one point I remember hearing critical care nurses had the highest divorce rates because we would try to take that control and bring it home. And then it's just like lead to all this conflict, So
I have heard that before when guys would list, in terms of profession,
who they wouldn't date.
Yeah, who was the most difficult type of woman to date. Nurses would be very, very, very high on the list. If they weren't number one, they were like number two. And obviously, I don't know anything about that because I've never dated a nurse.
It's controlling.
Yeah.
So that's that stuff. Like you would just get to work and you just might like butt heads with somebody, but you want to stand your ground. And so that's why I was like, it's easier if I don't make friends because obviously this is going to end up being uncomfortable. I wanted to come to work and just be comfortable every day. As I still work with nurses now, that's something that I ask them about. I'm like, do you feel like it's still catty sometimes? We're like, of course. Of course it is.
What were the conversations like during your last open heart surgery when you were in the hospital? So this would have been about 3 months ago.
Yeah.
And it looked like you were getting, to know your nurses that were taking care of you really, really well. I mean, you kind of were running that floor. It seemed like everybody knew who Nicole was. Everybody was popping into your room.
Yeah.
So, your effervescent energy was kind of infectious and whatnot. And I noticed that as well. But, what were some of the conversations that you had with like the nurses that were tending to you during your latest surgery? And then I want to get into, how you started to advocate for yourself, the contention that you ended up having with the couple of the doctors that were tending to you.
Yeah. With the nurses, I have to say, overall, they were phenomenal. There was a lot of relatability, obviously, and respect as, nurses to each other. I did have to pull my little anal retentive part out every once in a while. And that's just me. I'm to be honest, being a control freak, as I look back on it, I'm like, was it really that bad? One of my pet peeves is people that don't listen to you and they just do what they do because they're used to doing it.
Yeah, that's one of mine too. I have a whole host of pet peeves, but that's one of them.
Yeah. So here I am. I'm pretty much telling you how I feel, what this layout of the land of this evening or day is going to be like based on how I'm feeling. Because you did come in the room and say how I'm feeling. And then you don't listen to anything I just say. And now when I need you, because things are happening and I'm unraveling right before your very eyes, where are you? You know where to be found. I went through this with you. So that was some of the dialogue, but that happened as I started to get a little bit better. So, initially I was really, really sick. Some of that when you came to visit, like even when you came to see me in the hospital, I don't remember all of everything. You'll have to remind me even on some of that because it was still kind of fresh. But as you get further away from surgery and you're more with it, that's when your spiciness comes out a little bit more. And you don't want to play that nursing card all the time, but sometimes you have to.
Yeah.
So you asked me, how do I advocate? How do I interact with the nurses, the doctors? It was always from a perspective of, you got to tell me what's going on. Explain to me everything and why.
Yeah, because I understand. You can use all of the medical jargon terms because I understand them. I was here. I've been in this profession for over 20 years.
Listen to me. This is how I feel. So I do recall a moment where I remember them pushing for me to I had just got an emergent procedure after surgery where they had to put a temporary pacemaker in through my neck. And a pacemaker basically prevents your heart from, like, if it starts going really slow, prevents it from going too low, right?
I remember that.
It sets it at a certain rate so that your heart rate doesn't drop below a certain rate, and then it takes over.
Is that when it would it would reset, and you would almost like, it's almost like you would stop breathing for a second?
Well, yes, because I had an irregular rhythm, and so what would have is, like, it would just do what we call like a compensatory pause. So if you were looking at an ECG, like one of those tracings, it would just be it would be flat, and then it'll start beating again, right? And so if that's happening, then I'm not like perfusing my brain, so you'll take this deep breath because I could feel it. And so that's when you were there, and I'm like taking these deep breaths like this all the time. So I get this pacemaker, or they want to do it. They put the emergent one in, and then all of a sudden they said, oh, we have to take you to get that one replaced. I'm like, what? Tell me about why. They literally had the cart right now, like thinking I'm just gonna like get in this cart and go get this procedure, and I'm like, no.
Because this means cracking your chest open again.
Well, no, this was just going through my neck. Yeah,
okay.
But even when I got this neck one, I'll take a step back. I didn't let them just take me and do the procedure. I agreed I needed the procedure, but I wanted to make sure that everyone was on board. My advocacy started initially from my own experience. And I went through experience of what you're saying, where I knew I was really sick, something wasn't right. This was right before my third procedure. And I had a doctor telling me, you're fine. I'm calling the office. I'm saying, tell me exactly how I'm feeling. And they're saying, no, you're fine. We're just going to keep an eye on you. And I said, keep an eye on me? I'm symptomatic. Like, you want me to die? Because that's the next set. I'm already at my worst. So what are we keeping an eye on? I feel like at that moment, you're obligated to treat me at least based on my symptoms. And right after that phone call, I got on a plane I was on the West Coast, so it was a long flight. And I felt like crap. I thought I was going to just die on the plane.
Well, describe what feeling like you're going to die.
My heart was racing.
Okay.
I actually thought I was having a PE. Because I'm a nurse, I can kind of go through the symptoms and self-diagnose, which all doctors or nurses do, which is not always good because sometimes that keeps us from going to the ER and things like that when we're supposed to. But I felt bad. I could barely get off the plane. So in the airport, I called my doctors in Chicago, ran my symptoms by them, and I said, I think that the right side of my heart is not doing well. And he said, I agree with you. And I said, can I go home and take this, that, and the other? And basically what I wanted to take was a water pill to get some of the fluid that I felt like it was backing up in my heart that was making me feel bad to get it to go down.
Okay. I feel like
that is Lasix. That's the drug that everybody knows. Everybody's heard of Lasix. So long story short, that, for me speaking up, that led me into my third procedure.
Okay.
So had I not like really fought through and know my own body and know that something's wrong, what would have happened to me?
So what year was this?
That was in 2011. And this is stuff that when we talk today, some of the things that you're asking me is just because of my nursing experience. So I know. So what do you do for people who don't know? You keep in touch with people who know.
That is a fact. That is a fact. I, in the smallest measure, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
There are times where, I have a whole team that's helping me run this whole thing. And sometimes it seems like certain members of the team, it makes sense for me to assume that they're going to get into direct contact with the person that they need to, and they don't. And then I step in and it looks like micromanaging, which is what I don't want to do at all. I just want to assume that A is talking to B to get the outcome that we all want to happen. And it just doesn't happen. And I think that must happen a lot in hospitals where doctors are ignoring nurses, I don't know, I guess for lack of a better word, advice or recommendations because they think they don't need it, or they think that you don't know what you're talking about.
You know what? I think, so I'm gonna be honest. So the way I've actually witnessed this, so critical care is kind of one of the nurse practitioner, critical care, like more of the higher, I'm trying to use my words so I don't offend anyone, but higher forms of nursing, right? It's more, you have to have a bachelor's degree. You can't have a 2-year degree, that kind of thing. So, and things change very fast. So that's why I'm saying you have to be able to solve this puzzle for your entire shift. That's very different than a floor nurse with 6 or 7 patients. You can imagine that the level of care is different and how sick a patient is different, right? Because you've got 7 or 8 patients that you're taking care of. And in critical care, you've got 1 or 2 really sick patients. What happens is that I've watched doctors' behavior change from each level of nursing. So in critical care, they work closer with them because we're calling them all the time. Well, all the nurses are calling all the time, but the patients are sicker, so they're calling more. They're there on the unit more. So then
So it's a little bit more of a respect level?
It's a little bit.
A higher level of respect. Got it.
And I've watched this. And then I'll see the doctor go down to, let's suppose, like a step-down unit, the one level from the critical care. Okay, so now their relationship comes a little bit further apart. Now they're on just like a basic floor after that. Oh,
there's barely any communication.
Yeah, and I think a lot of nurses out here would agree with me that they have seen that. I've watched it even in the medical device industry because I'm following the patient along their path, and I'm looking like, he wasn't acting like that upstairs. And look at him, he's like being almost a total jerk now, you know? So are all doctors that way? No, some people are just, they're human, right? They're human, they make mistakes. They're human in the sense that...
And sometimes they're human and they're assholes.
And they're human and they're assholes. Yes, that you are 100% correct. And you just got to be happy with... That's why you pick your doctors. You still ask your questions. Even if they're being an asshole to you, don't let that intimidate you from advocating for yourself. Still ask the same questions. And believe it or not, what I learned from this hospitalization was there's actually, most hospitals have a patient advocate. So if you feel like things aren't going the way you want it to go, or if you don't like your doctor, or you don't feel like, they actually have people to come to your room and offer to be your advocate.
Okay.
And I didn't even know that existed until this particular hospitalization.
I discovered that when I was in the hospital for my car wreck. She was an angel. Her name was Cynthia Pena. I will never forget this woman because she's literally like an angel on earth. She walked into my room and she was from administration, but she was also patient advocate. And she just was asking me a series of questions. And then the questions got to be insurance related, which was terrifying to me because I was a typical person in the entertainment industry in LA who was not like an A-list, B-list, even C-list. I didn't have insurance. Like the lion's share of us did not have insurance. And this was really scary because I was looking down the barrel at like about $100,000 worth of, medical bills. Wow. And this woman's level of advocacy just was on a whole other level. She ended up working out so many things for me so that wasn't going to be my reality. But in addition to that, her last question as she walked out the door, I took over and I'm telling a little story, but her last question as she walked out the door was, oh, by the way, do you want an alias do you want to be under an alias? And I said, no, I mean, I'm not that big a deal. And she said, well, let me put it to you like this. If anybody calls the hospital and they ask for you by name and you're not under an alias, they're going to get put through to your room by phone, or if they walk in here, they're going to be able to be directed to your room. And I was just like, oh, that presents a significant problem.
Absolutely.
Yes, put me under an alias. Tinkerbell, please. And she was like, no, it's got to be like a real actual name. I said, all right, fine. So I gave her a name and it saved me from a lot of insanity. Yeah. But that's a whole, I just digress. But tell the audience a very simple, 3 or 4 examples of how to advocate for self. So number one would be there is a patient advocate who is in a hospital, who works in a hospital.
Absolutely. The second thing would be always write down your questions. I think that for some reason when we get in front of doctors, we get nervous. I don't know why.
We think that they know everything.
So
we think that they know everything, and that, and that we should just listen to them, carte blanche, total authority.
And that's, I mean, they know a lot, right? But you got to remember, every patient isn't the same, because that's what medicine is. It's this puzzle that you're always trying to put back together, and it's always something that's not so cut and dry. So sometimes when we think mistakes are made, it's because it appears that way in a non-medical sense on the outside. But when you get the full picture, it's because nothing wasn't as clear cut. When I talk about my most recent surgery, I'll give you an example of that. But if I had to get back to what would I say? I would say use the patient advocate, talk to your friends or resources that you have that are in that profession. Have them help you make a list of questions. And then when you get those answers, go back to that person. Don't just take it and do nothing with it. Go back and run it by the people that you know can kind of help you along the way. I know because I'm in the profession, right? The third thing is, don't be afraid to ask for a second opinion. If you're going to get any major procedure, I would say you deserve it to yourself to get a second opinion. And doctors are used to it. I just had a conversation with a doctor the other day, and he said, absolutely. When you are reading tests, this is why second opinions are good. Remember, because they're human. It could be one tiny little thing that's missed on the human eye that somebody else may pick up. That's why you're getting the second opinion. It's not to say that this doctor doesn't know what they're doing or you don't trust them. It's because you want another set of eyes to maybe by chance pick up something. Think about some of the breast cancer survivors that said it was the first one came out negative, and then when they got a repeat, it showed up. Maybe it got bigger, but maybe it didn't. Maybe it was just another set of eyes because it was hidden behind something else and they caught it. You know what I mean? So I would say always get a second opinion, and don't be afraid to ask for it. Actually, when you're talking to a doctor, don't be afraid of anything. It's your life. It's your body. You should never be afraid of asking too many questions or even taking up too much time. If a doctor doesn't have to, they do in their offices, they are under a time crunch sometimes because they're trying to see so many patients, so they don't want to get behind schedule. But then just say, no, I want more time. Schedule me because I have more questions. Who can I talk to? The other thing that a lot of people don't know about is, and don't be afraid to use them, is they feel that when the doctor puts you off from their nurse practitioner, that's them trying to kind of not focus on you and you're not the priority. And that's not the case, because you have to remember, nurses are the ones that interact with the patients the most. It's because they have the most time with them. Whether they're in the hospital, in the critical care unit, the reason why they're valued so much is because they're with you 24 hours a day. So a doctor should come in and say, so tell me about the patient. How did the night go? How did the day go? And get updated and give them. And for the most part, doctors do respect nurses in that regards for the most part. But like you said, you're going to get some that are just innately arrogant, chip on their shoulders, and they have to be the ones that, I came from back in the day where doctors could curse you out, and I used to get stuff thrown at me across the room, and that would be acceptable behavior. Now that's not the case. But yes.
What had to change for doctors to be told you cannot throw things at your nurse practitioners?
Yeah.
What had to change for that to happen?
Yeah. It's just, well, you know what? I think what had to change was nurses started speaking up. And like I mentioned before, some of hospitals are unionized, which is great, because now they have their own advocate, like someone that can fight for them, write people up and say, this is not acceptable. I can't go to the doctor. They may not feel like as a nurse I can go and tell them because this might be the director of XYZ. But at least they got that union that could be their voice and then can go and take it. Or if they have a manager that will listen to them and say, yeah, this isn't acceptable. So I think more and more nurses started speaking out, like this is not acceptable behavior. And things started changing for the better. So I would say if I went back to your original question about the advocacy, which I hope I answered, but that's what I would say. The top things is use your resources and don't be afraid to ask questions and never feel like, oh, he just looked like he had to go. And no, make him stay.
I mean, I feel like this is a question that, we have the luxury of even pontificating about because we live in a cosmopolitan city, but after speaking to, Dr. Femi, who was on a previous episode, I learned about something called medical deserts. I mean, I don't know what kind of advice could be dispensed to people who reside in rural areas where, medical deserts exist, and where the level of care is not the same that you'd get at St. Jude's. So, I mean, would there be a different level of self-advocacy that you can advise for somebody who might not live in the kind of, in the cities that we live in and have that level of sophisticated medical care?
Well, I think whether it's rural or not, I think at some point there was a rise in community hospitals, right? And that rise was because so that we can treat patients that have heart attacks faster and get them to the hospital. But remember, that's a place for you to get stabilized and then go to a bigger, institution or something like that. So I think, but what some people do is they stay at the community hospital a little too long. So once again, that goes back to if you have a loved one that goes into the hospital, right then you should be talking to your friends that are doctors or nurses or something to help. Don't just sit at that and let your loved ones just stay there. It may be a point in time, depending on what's going on with them. And this is not a dig against community hospitals because we need them. They're keeping patients alive. Everybody doesn't need to go to this big hospital to get all this stuff done. Everybody doesn't need it. But at that point, you, the family member, you're not going to know it unless you're using and communicating. One of my pet peeves, and I'm going to use this, another pet. You're like, oh, yeah, I got a lot of pet peeves.
I have a lot of pet peeves. About 15 of them are about driving, but go on.
Oh my gosh. When I talk to my friends and I don't expect for everybody to know all these medical terms, is when I say, what's going on with your brother, your mom, whatever, and they can't say it back to me. That's unacceptable. That means you didn't understand anything that the doctor told you. You should never walk away not understanding what's wrong with you or your loved one if you're having that direct conversation. It's different if the patient themselves is telling you so they're not painting a complete story. That's something different. But whenever you're in front of a doctor and you're asking about what's going on with me or my loved one, you should be able to explain it back to someone. If you can't, shame on you. You got to go back.
And ask more questions.
You got to ask more questions. You should understand it. But not enough people do. They come back with, he said something was going on with the heart and, I don't know, but he just says she needs this procedure. What is the something? What? Give me a little bit more. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't have to understand medicine to understand what's going on with you or your loved ones. And that's one of my biggest pet peeves.
Is that people don't ask enough questions.
People don't ask enough questions.
And they don't ask questions even when they're confused. Got it.
And they walk away with the something, and something. But I think we're going to do surgery tomorrow. What is the something, and something? So you can't be an advocate if you're not equipped with the tools, right, to be an advocate. And you got to start at least by asking questions, using your resource. The other resource that I forgot to mention, I'm noticing a lot of insurance companies having like nurses that can call you and help you with certain exams and things like that.
Over the phone?
Yeah, over the phone, yeah.
So telehealth.
Yes, so the insurance company hires nurses and one called me about 3 weeks ago, just offering like, do you need anything? Do you have questions about anything? So that, once again, that can prep you for your, I don't know, your next gynae visit, and you're telling them what's going on with you. You could use a service like that to even help you come up with questions that you should, ask your doctor while you're there. So I think that most people, if I had to say, why don't you ask questions? They either say, because I feel like they have my best interest in heart, they'll tell you, but no one can advocate for yourself more than you. You have to be your own advocate. And I would think if you care about your body enough, you will start asking questions. The other thing is, like I said, they just get intimidated and then they just feel small in the room with the doctor. Doctors, they do know a lot.
But they don't know everything.
They don't know everything. Yeah. And sometimes they have to reach out to their colleagues.
To ask
you do
questions.
know that they ask for, yeah.
No, they don't. Nobody knows that.
Yeah, they do.
Nobody knows that. Nobody imagines that the therapist has a therapist. Nobody knows that.
They do. Even while you're in their presence. Like I went to the doctor to get my incision looked at. I was having some problems with it healing. And he said, I'll be right back.
And he went to go make a phone call.
He went to go make a phone call.
Did he tell you that?
He came back in the room saying, I just spoke with Dr. Such and Such, but he didn't tell me he was going to ask somebody for their opinion, but he did come back and say, I just spoke with Dr. Such and Such. And then I could also hear through the wall, so I heard him call the plastic surgeon too. So he developed this plan.
Yeah.
So the sicker you are, the more people are involved. And that's another thing that people have to keep in mind. It's never just one person. And part of what you saw when you came to visit me was me pushing back saying,
there's too many cooks in the kitchen.
There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. I need to make sure everybody's on the same page. Because in an emergent situation, you're like, this has to be done. But I wanted to make sure everybody knew what was going on and signed off on it. That was very, very important to me. And who that everyone was I had a cardiologist, I had a cardiac surgeon, I had an electrophysiologist, and now I have critical care medicine that's managing me. Who are you guys talking to each other? And so they had the bed lined up, and I was like, no. I'm not getting on that until you come back and tell me who's all signed off on this. And literally they had to come back and say, okay, we got in touch with this, but we wasn't able to get in touch with this only person. And I was like, okay, I'm okay with it from that, and then that happened. So Mel, since I have this platform, I always like to leave people when they ask me about my experience and everything that I've been through. There's a couple things it's important to know. When I got diagnosed with heart disease, I had no symptoms whatsoever. I went to the gynecologist for a pap smear and walked out with heart problems. So you may say, how the fuck does that happen?
Yeah, I do want to ask how that happens. But I mean, does that happen normally?
No. So what happened was, because this gynecologist, she has the ability in her license, she practices medicine, so she can do physicals. Every gynecologist obviously doesn't do your yearly physical, but this one.
So is it just a stethoscope kind of?
She did a full physical. She listened to my heart, lungs, and then all of a sudden she stayed on my heart really long. And I'm like, oh. So I thought she started teaching because people came in. So from that moment on, she diagnosed me with something, remember those valves? Called aortic insufficiency. So that murmur that we spoke about earlier had actually gotten worse, unbeknownst to me. And I was still training like I was in college or something. I was squatting 250. I was doing heavy, intense workouts. I was nice and strong, but I had no symptoms. So I had to go to the cardiologist actually that day, which doesn't always happen. They always put in a referral and you get it so oftentimes weeks later. So I went to the cardiologist and they're like, your heart is really bad. And then they did all this testing and they found I had that big artery that comes out of your heart that you see on pictures that goes like this. It's called your aorta. It was a big aneurysm in that. An aneurysm is like an outpouching. It's like a balloon that'll bust. We've heard of brain aneurysms that rupture, right? So this is in the major part of my heart, or the major artery in my heart. And so they said, we're going to keep an eye. It's getting kind of big. If it gets to the point where we need to go in and fix it, and it's going to be at risk of rupturing. And that's exactly what happened. So 6 months after that diagnosis is when I had my first surgery, because the aneurysm was getting, so big. So my point is, from that point is, go to the doctor. Do your yearly physicals and checks. And, the insurance company has gotten better on paying and covering screenings that we should get. Follow everything that you're supposed to at your age. Do your self-breast exams, go get your mammograms, go get your prostate screenings, all that stuff, because it actually will help you.
It's preventative.
It's preventative. Even when I had my first surgery, they took an x-ray and they took the film down too low and they found cysts on my liver.
Wow.
Guess what? They were from birth control pills. I'm the 1% where birth control pills can cause, or estrogen, can cause cyst on your liver. It's called focal nodule hyperplasia of the liver. And I'm the 1% Who would have thought? But from that point on, I saw a liver specialist. Yeah. So sometimes it just takes something.
Sometimes it's completely accidental.
It's accidental.
Yeah.
But you were doing the right thing.
I had the exact same thing happen to me just recently. And this is a to be continued kind of thing, because I was having a neck and shoulder issue. And my ortho wanted me to go get an MRI of my cervical spine. And so they did an MRI of my cervical spine, which indicated that I have a slightly herniated disc in my C5 or C6 or something. I was like, really? I do? Because I don't have any symptoms. They're asking me if I have any of the, numbing in my arm or whatever the case is, and I don't have any of the symptoms of a herniated disc, but it's mild. Yeah. But guess what the MRI also showed? That I have nodules on my thyroid. And I don't know, at this moment, I have no idea what it means. I've already put in a call to my doctor so that I can go and get an ultrasound done on my thyroid to discover what that means. And it could mean nothing, or it could mean something really, really serious. Yeah. And I don't know right now, but you're absolutely right in the fact that there's sometimes where you are asymptomatic of anything that's going wrong, but the only thing that you can do is just check in regularly with your primary care physician, with your doctors, get the screenings that you need to get, and then just, monitor yourself and try to live as healthy of a lifestyle as possible.
And the second thing is listen to your body. You listen to your body and you took care of it. For everything that's happened to me, I was my biggest advocate because I listened to my body. All the time, the signs and symptoms won't be as in your face. This go round of surgery, this had nothing to do with congenital heart disease. It was just called bad luck. Bad luck because I had other, heart issues. Going into the surgery, I had 5 foreign things in my heart alone. So I'm predisposed for a lot of different things, and one of them being getting an infection in your heart. Nothing I can do to really prevent it except take antibiotics before I go to the dentist, but I'm predisposed to, if some type of infection gets into my body, it could get into the lining of my heart, and then I run into this set of problems. But my biggest symptom was fatigue. So the question is, does everybody know the difference for being tired and fatigue? So fatigue is debilitating. That's you can't do anything.
Fatigue is a perimenopausal symptom. That's also it. So you kind of just throw the dice up and just be like, I don't know what's going to happen.
You can't push through fatigue. Yeah. You can't push through it. Tiredness, all that. But I kept pushing through, thinking I'm tired. But it wasn't until I got to fatigue where I'm just can't do anything. And then I end up getting it. But I needed one more thing. The fatigue wasn't really, I know that should have been enough, but it wasn't. It was the fever. That was something's really going on. So I would say all that to say is, go to the doctor. Don't let fear keep you. I hear a lot of men say this. It's just a whole nother topic of conversation in men's health too. But a lot of men, they'll get a sign or symptom and not even want to go to the doctor and find out. Because actually I had a man tell me that, I said, you need to get your heart checked. And they said,
they'd rather not know.
They'd rather not know. And they were like, I'm not strong like you, Nicole. I'm like, what? This is your body.
Yeah.
Go fight for it. So go to the doctor. Don't be scared. I couldn't not be on here without leaving those tidbits that I'm sure all of us heard, but this is the face of heart disease. This is what it looks like, right? We think people are so healthy.
Yeah.
And we're walking
And you have
around,
no idea what battle
idea.
somebody is fighting on the inside.
So it can happen to you.
Yeah.
You know, I wish more and more, as we even hear about, you and I talked about this, different people on Instagram, we hear that pass.
Yeah.
Sometimes I want them to tell us why, because
Yeah.
it keeps it real. It keeps it present in the moment, not thinking everyone's
what the
invincible.
whole process was like from symptom to diagnosis to treatment to possibly even getting close to the end.
Yeah.
But first of all, for 3 months post-op, you look incredible. I really, when I saw you laying in the hospital, I was like, how long is this rehab gonna take? Like,
I didn't know what
I love you. You look like you were knocking at death's door. We were like praying hard, but to see you sitting here looking, golden is just, I love it.
Wearing my incision proud.
Yeah, and that's exactly, listen, the older that we get, I'm not trying to correct anything. I'm not trying to, get Botoxed or fillered or what. We earned these scars.
And
we earned these stripes, these scars, the cellulite, the stretch mark, all the things. We earned them.
Because these scars have a story.
They really, really do. So I want to do something fun. I want to do something that I always do with like some of my guests, rapid fire. When it makes sense, we do it. So we're going to do it today.
I'm not doing it though.
Yeah, you are.
That's for you.
No.
Oh, shoot.
No,
Okay.
You're doing it.
Oh my gosh. I should have known. And I started this like, I love rapid fire. I didn't think I was a part of it.
Okay.
Okay, but
we got this.
Let's go with it. Let's go with it.
Go ahead.
Beach or pool?
Beach.
White bread or wheat bread?
Wheat. White.
Salsa or guacamole?
Guac.
Spicy.
Photo or video?
Video.
Yeah.
Flowers or chocolates?
Chocolates.
Flowers.
Top or bottom?
In what sense?
Bottom.
Are we...
Whatever you want it to mean.
Sense?
Whatever you want it to mean.
Bottom.
Morning shift or graveyard shift?
Graveyard.
Yeah.
Wax or shave?
Wax.
This is great. We really are friends.
Yeah, that's it. Okay.
Oh my goodness, that was
easy. That was easy. That was easy.
So I want to thank you because this is the first time I've been trying to post something to thank everyone, that village you talked about, and I was able to get through this without crying because, I'm still processing all of this. You're supposed to be here, like
and you are supposed to. You are supposed to be here, girl.
Supposed to be here
because I need you. I need you. We have a lot more that we have to accomplish. More brunch, more life, more trips, more everything. Wine. More life.
Cheers to life, guys.
Cheers. Well, I'm gonna.